And to that piece of lieutenant that's always on his podcast, bash us, him.
All right, everybody. Eric Dim, your most complained cop, NYPD. This is New York's Finest Retired Unfiltered podcast. This is our 265 Police Live series. Along with me is the co-host and founder to the podcast, John McCarry, retired lieutenant. My brother, how you doing? Let's get right into it. Let's talk about the article that just surfaced about this podcast and about the way that the police department try to silence the members of the police department and also silence us from our First Amendment speech.
Yeah, sure. So I put a tweet out online because, I mean, me and Eric continuously are getting notified about how they're being basically targeted for liking our podcast, sharing our podcast, telling not to interact with our podcast. I mean, numerous warnings have went out, both in rumors and then confirmed things through credible sources that this is happening, and it's. So I put a tweet out about it because I think it's completely wrong. I'll read the tweet I put out. I put NYPD cops are being warned to not listen or watch New York's Finest Retired and Unfiltered podcast or like our social media accounts at work while utilizing department computers. Rumor is the department is also identifying active members who like, share, or engage with, in quotes, 2 retired lieutenants on social media in an attempt to identify who is doing so while at work. In my opinion, this is being done to build a profile of which members are not fond of this administration, so they can be illegally targeted in the future, regardless of if they utilize their God-given First Amendment rights on or off duty. To put this in perspective, members of the NYPD can listen to the radio while performing their duties. They can have the TV on in the background in offices. They can read newspapers, but they cannot listen to or watch the Finest Unfiltered on department computers while they work. If members of the NYPD can watch or listen to MSNBC or Fox News, or read the New York Post or the Daily News, or listen to music at work on department computers, then they can also listen to any podcast they so choose, even those that are not well received by this mayoral appointed administration. I guess you guys just continue to swear an oath to the Constitution at your numerous promotion ceremonies without fully understanding it. Are we officially banned from the NYPD? At NYPD Daughtry, at NYPD Chief of Patrol. Someone put a missing alert out for NYPD police unions. They have been missing since 2021. Yet another witch hunt has ensued against active members, and again, you all cower in silence to this inept and immature administration. They will try to save face by slandering us and freely agreeing to give away their members and their own God-given freedom again. God bless America. God bless the NYPD. God bless the FDNY. So that tweet basically sparked an article from the Post. Eric, what do you think about what I wrote there?
Well, it's spot on. I think the first thing what we could talk about, what you wrote definitely entails what we always talk about, right? I mean, on duty, I think it's fair to say that cops should not have their time consumed with social media and other distractions, TV and other things like that. But of course, it's part of the nature. You have downtime, you have breaks. But what's important to note is that exactly what you said, MSNBC is being viewed, Fox News, different types of politics. But why has this podcast become the target of the police department? I think that's what's important to analyze here, right? Because we have different mainstream media that is critical of the NYPD, of policing and politics, how it penetrates the police department. We have freelance photographers and video freelancers like stringers, like we had the other day, Loud Labs, who report stuff in the police department. And we also have other podcasts out there. But why has the police department become so driven with the overzealous attack on New York's Finest Retired Unfiltered podcast is because the array of topics that we discuss, our perspective and analysis of the police department has been a focus on the weak upper management of the police department, because that's ultimately what's affecting public safety. It's affecting morale. It's affecting the mass exodus, which started from the actual mandate itself. And it's important to note when it comes to this stuff, that our analysis has been echoing the overwhelming majority of the rank and file of the police department. And that's the ultimate reason for the target on this podcast. Also, it's twofold. Another reason is that the police department does a great job of manipulating statistics and giving and vocalizing to the public a mirage that the streets of New York City are extremely safe and that their perception does not match reality. And the underlining is that we have a vast majority of knowledge that if things were different, it's our opinion, and I think it would be tough to argue, that John and I would be climbing the ladder of the police department had we still be employed by the NYPD. We'd probably be working our way to chiefs ourselves. I myself was on the captain's list. John, I'm confident, would excel and blow through that test as well. So we will climb into the ranks of the police department. So we understand that the silver linings of the police department. So we challenge the police department when they give nonsense to the public when it comes to crime statistics. John and I recently were on a Twitter space, and we had some great questions about how does the police department manipulate these statistics and explain to the public that crime is down. So what we've been able to say is this, is the police department is not necessarily lying, but they are giving omissions, and it's a magic trick. So if you look at crime when it comes to CompStat sheets, ultimately crime is up. But when crime is up, you're also going to have little dips as we go. Just as if someone was experiencing, if they were going through weight loss and they're trying to lose weight, they're going to lose weight, but there are going to be moments where they gain a couple of pounds and they come back down. And it's the same thing with crime. So we could see in a month period that CompStat analyzes, maybe halfway through the month, there may be a portion where crime goes down, but it's still up. So crime could be up 40%, rhetorically speaking. But March 1st, March 15th, rhetorically speaking, let's say crime goes down 10%. So it goes down 10% from that 40%, but it's still up 30%. So they could tell the public, well, crime is down 10%. But what they're not telling you is that ultimately the majority of it is up 40%. So it's really mirage and omitting things. So that's what you have to understand. But ultimately, I believe perception is reality.
Yeah, and just to put in layman's terms, when it comes to a big reason why they don't like this podcast, I personally believe the number one reason is the memes more than anything. I think the memes really take a big ego blow. They're completely satirical memes. They're really not done they're not done in with hate or anger behind it, but this is the consensus of what people are feeling. The ideas really come from the rank and file of the NYPD, as well as we have some of our own ideas that we put out there. But it's stuff that really needs to be pointed out, and it's done through comedy. It's done using comedy, same way Babylon Bee does. The Babylon Bee does all the same things. I personally think ours are much harsher towards the New York City Police Department. They focus in on New York City, on politicians. But I believe they're accurate. I believe when you look at the memes, you could look at a source of them. But the other reason is exactly what Eric just explained, is how they misrepresent crime stats and how there is now two people out there that are pushing back. So we see that transit crime was a big issue at the beginning of the year. It was up almost 26%. For the month of February, transit crime was down 13%. So you saw ad after ad. Transit crime is down. Transit crime is down. Transit crime is down 13%. You didn't get to see necessarily the little asterisks where it's for the month of February or for the week of whatever. And like Eric said, when we're looking at crime, we're looking at it from that 2018 range. Crime's up significantly, not only in transit, but everywhere. And you could see even now they're failing. We've just deployed the National Guard into New York City subways. And for that week and the following week, crime's up almost 16%. And you could see it. All the numbers we use is right from there. So as they put it's right from the NYPD. So as they put I want to call it propaganda, because that's basically what it is crime's down, crime's down, crime's down. I'll just retweet it and be like, actually, transit crime's up 16.7% for this week, and it's up for the 28-day period this much, and for this, it's up this, and they can't stand it. And that's a big blow too. And I think those are the two main reasons why this podcast has been so targeted by the upper echelon of the NYPD.
Well, absolutely. You know what? Let's talk about that. Since you brought that up, let's talk about how the National Guard has been deployed to the subways. So it's ironic. At the same time, John Shell, the chief of patrol of the New York City Police Department, along with Kaz Daughtry, the deputy commissioner of operations, and of course, Mayor Eric Adams, have been perpetuating misinformation to the public. Not necessarily a lie, but exactly what we said, kind of a magic trick, using the mirage of crime dips up and down to give the perception that the city is ultimately safe. When we see just complete havoc, what's going on in the subways is just it's uninhabitable right now for passengers or anyone transporting in these subways right now. But what do we see? We see them telling the public that it's safe, and at the same time, the governor is deploying the National Guard to the subways. So it's almost like we're shaking our head yes, but it's really no. So at the same time, and this is what we find extremely problematic with Mayor Eric Adams. Both John and I have been critical of, is that he says one thing and he does another, or he does one thing and says another. We see him talking out both sides of his mouth. So he's saying that the streets are safe, but at the same time, he also aligned himself with Governor Hochul, saying, great job that she's deploying the National Guardsmen. So it's important to note that now with the National Guardsmen deployed to the subways, does that change anything? Will it change anything? So we believe it's a complete show. But ultimately, John, what do you think the ultimate goal or the perception of deploying the National Guard is, especially at this time?
All right, so it's a tough question, but I'm gonna answer it the best way I can. I don't think it's a show at all. I think New Yorkers should look at that. It has nothing to do with deterring crime, in my opinion. Deploying the National Guard has nothing to do with deploying crime. You're not going to see it in the outer boroughs. You're not going to see it in the train stations that are high in crime, where you're out in the Bronx, you're out in the South Bronx, you're out in the bowels of Brooklyn, and you're trying to get on the train to go to work, and there's homeless and there's drugs and there's crime happening in your station. You're not going to see the National Guard there, and crime's not going to go down there. So I don't believe that move was for crime. If you look the morning before the National Guard was deployed by Governor Kathy Hochul, Eric Adams didn't even know why she was coming. They're like, oh, the governor's going to make an announcement later. What is it? He's like, oh, she's going to help us with the cameras. And Kemper's sitting there too, and they have no idea that the National Guard's about to be deployed. And I think that should scare New Yorkers a lot, because I think that it's been determined, not just from the actions, and we'll get into that article in a few minutes, not just the actions that have happened to just us, but what's going on in this city and what's going on in the NYPD, is that New York City is in a state of corruption. And in my opinion, and I have no proof of this, I have no proof, but this is just how I feel by looking at that video, by watching the videos of the National Guard doing bag searches. I really believe that Governor Kathy Hochul was notified of a possible terrorist attack. And I believe that New York City mayor and the NYPD were not. Because what you see is the National Guard gets deployed. You don't see wands. You don't see metal detectors, you would be looking for guns and knives if you were looking to keep crime down. You see them deployed to the main subway stations, right? Union Square, Times Square, all of the big ones, right? The terrorist targets, right? So you see National Guard deployed there. They're doing random bag checks. It appears to me that they're looking for something else other than criminal activity. It looks for terrorism. And that's what it appears like to push people, to stop that from happening. And so in that case, I do support the National Guard being deployed to help out, because obviously the NYPD is depleted. It's a depleted force and they don't have the manpower. But I think when you look at the NYPD's response to Governor Kathy Hochul doing that, John Shell, when he says the subways aren't a war zone, we don't need the National Guard. That's scary to me, because I'm like, this guy, I don't even know where he is, because my first thought was terrorism, terrorism, terrorism. And his first thought is perception, perception, perception. Oh, it makes us look like we're not doing a bad job. It makes us look like we're doing a bad job. Everything's a personal attack on this administration. You can't criticize them. Everything is a complete personal attack. So I think, to just sum it up, it has absolutely nothing to do with crime. It will not deter crime. If anything, it will push crime, the crime that would have happened in those major stations where they're deployed. It'll just push it out to the other crime. You're not stopping. You're only preventing it at that moment in that location. That's it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I mean, we both spoke about this offline. I definitely think that that's the intentions. I don't think, well, let me just even backtrack on this and just say it. I myself, I'm a combat veteran, served in the Marine Corps, so I understand how the National Guard works. And I think it's important to understand that the National Guardsmen are trained by the U.S. Army. So what's the difference between the National Guard and the actual U.S. Army? Is the National Guard is state funded. So if anybody doesn't understand, National Guard is state funded, and the governor can deploy the National Guard. When the National Guard gets deployed overseas, they fall under the U.S. Army. So what's important to also talk about with this is funding. So this does also affect the taxpayer of New York State, because we're using state funds to deploy the National Guard. And I think it's important to note also what you said about John Shell. It's exactly what I said. I had put a tweet in response to his rhetoric, how the National Guard is not needed because about the perception versus reality that the subways are actually safe. And I said, are you going to say that publicly in a realm with Governor Hochul? So sure enough, when Governor Hochul actually deployed the National Guard, he had a different tweet, and it was aligned with Governor Hochul. So again, we talk about these pale faces pandering to their bosses because of their self-serving careers. That's exactly what they're doing. And again, that's another reason why this podcast has become such a threat. It's because what we say on camera here is the same thing that we would say behind closed doors at home or in a locker room. But that's not something that they could say for themselves. If they were ever caught and recorded, their conversation behind closed doors is much different than what they say on camera and what they say on their social media posts that are public. So what I can say also, I agree with John. I think the National Guard is there as when I say a show, it's a show for everyone to believe that they're there to assist the police department in this mass exodus with crime. But I do believe that the issue is that there was a potential attack. Why? We have a huge migrant crisis right now. So there could be some intelligence that's not being delved to the public. And I think there's absolutely no communication between Governor Hochul and Mayor Eric Adams himself, because it's a complete incompetent administration on the local level in New York City. And I do believe that, because I know that the National Guard, just like the Marine Corps, is not a police force. What does that mean? They don't do intrusive police work, which is what the police department does. That's what that iconic shield is, doing intrusive police work. What the National Guard is there is for presence and to take action if needed. But what's also happening with this is now it's also an infringement on the Fourth Amendment for obliging citizens in the subways. So it's really sad to see, because we're not addressing the issue of crime. We're not doing intrusive police work, but we're checking the bags of mostly obliging passengers in New York City. So it's a horrible thing to see at this point. And I do believe that seeing the National Guardsmen, as you said, it's not going to stop crime. It's not going to deter it. If anything, it may displace it. But ultimately, I think they're there exactly that, to prevent a potential terrorist attack, probably emanating from this migrant crisis.
Well, I just want to clarify too. I don't think that Hochul and Adams aren't talking. I think Kathy Hochul was told not to tell him because he's under an active criminal investigation and he's deemed untrustworthy. And I believe the same for the upper echelon of the NYPD. Something's going on up there, and I really, really think that they are not credible people, and that is why she ran out. Governor Hochul deployed the National Guard without telling them, announced the National Guard was coming while she was driving on her way to New York City. So I believe she was told something that happened in a panic. And again, I have no inside information on that. It's just from what I see and how it played out. And the response from the NYPD scared me. The response, the look in the face of New York City Mayor and Chief Kemper, and the response from John Schell scared me. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to lie about it at all. And you're right. That's one of the main reasons they hate this, because we talk about the internal workings of the brain of the police officer, what we think, right? What we know based upon our anecdotal experience and our knowledge and what we've seen in the past. And so, I mean, we've welcomed everybody that's in the NYPD is welcome to come on the show in the upper echelon. I mean, we don't speak over anyone. We don't talk over anyone. So for them to really take opposition to this podcast and not come on and sit down and just have a conversation with us just really shows the type of people they are, the integrity that they have, the courage that they have, and their true character.
That's great. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about their true character. What have we seen? And their true character has been nothing but flawed. We see weak, egotistical men that are more concerned with their bruised egos than public safety. And I think that's ultimately what I think you're 100% right. When they put their tweets out about perception versus reality, really what it comes down is the perception of their egos and not the reality of what's going on with public safety. And I think if they were really truly humble, as Kaz Daughtry said, that he said he's humbled to be in a leadership position, I think that they would tell the public the truth and say, listen, we are doing the best. We've suffered a major loss of members of this police department due to a mandate. We suffered a loss due to post-George Floyd effect. We're having trouble recruiting, but we have the best intentions. And here's what we're going to do to try to keep you safe. Here is our plan. But what are we lacking? We're lacking a plan, and we're lacking transparency and integrity. The transparency would be exactly that and say, listen, unfortunately, it's not as safe as it once was. We want to bring it back. These are the issues that we see. This is what we're working on. But instead, they're given public rhetoric and lies. Why are they lying to your face? Why? Because they're more concerned with their self-serving careers than your safety. And ultimately, that should be a huge red flag and a problem for New Yorkers. New Yorkers are salt of the earth people. And frankly, I think that they're tired of seeing this. I think they're tired of seeing a New York City Police Department is completely inept and inadequate. I mean, right here in this picture right here, you see what arguably could be the three henchmen of the New York City Police Department of who potentially is in charge. And when I say potentially, because ultimately we do not know who's in charge. We have the most invisible and insignificant police commissioner that we've ever seen. Ed Caban is never anywhere to be found when it's something of significance and importance when it comes to a crisis or something critical with the public. The only time that we see a tweet or anything involving Ed Caban when it's something that's happy-go-lucky, it's an event or people smiling, but when it's a critical event, ultimately it's Kaz Daughtry or John Schell. Most of the time it's Kaz Daughtry. So even his clothes, to me, mimic that he's the actual commissioner of the police department. He's the deputy commissioner of operations. You see on his chest that it says commissioner. He's always at the front speaking about the police department. Now, listen, I'm not saying he doesn't work hard. Obviously, he does. It seems that he cares to work hard. He's involved in everything, but he's not ready for the task. And he does not have the ability to be the police commissioner, especially at this time. And I think that he suffers from a weak, immature ego, and it's really affecting his ability. And what we saw in this last speech, I find alarming. I don't like what he said. What he said was, when it came to that shooting on the subway that involved someone in self-defense, that he said for those that got out safely, it was pretty much a success. But ultimately, the speech sounded to me that it was kind of shame-blaming those that did not get out safe. And at no point should we ever be blaming the victims. The police department needs to take accountability and responsibility for what's going on in those trains and tell the public the truth. They do not have the manpower, and they do not have the ability with the legislation that has been acted to do police work in the same manner, but they're doing everything that they can in their efforts. And the number one effort that they could do to have a strong police force is by supporting their men and women, and say that our men and women will be supported financially through any potential civil liability, and they will be protected for the Civilian Complaint Review Board so that they can go out there and be safe. And we have the unions on board, but that's not what we're hearing.
Yeah, so I mean, I put this. I just quoted Kaz Daughtry in this, FYI. Like, I just quoted him word for word. I put this speech out because I watched it. A couple of people sent it to me, like, please watch this. So I watched it. This was the part that stuck out the most to me. So I'll just let you guys listen to it, and then let's just talk about it, because I think it's very telltale of where his head is at. I agree with Eric. You hear the ego come in. Again, everything's an attack. When crime happens, it's an attack on this administration as far as they're concerned. It's not, it has nothing to do with, it's, well, we're doing a great job. It's like, well, who said you weren't? Who's blaming you for what happened? Yeah, yes. Did this happen after the National Guard was deployed? Yes. Has there been crazy incidents on New York City trains every day since you've been doing your campaign of transit crimes down and the National Guard's deployed? Yes. So it makes you look bad and you feel like an idiot. And then you go up on stage and you project to the crowd exactly what everyone thinks that you guys are, egotistical. And here it goes. Here's Kaz Daughtry right after the shooting, speaking about this shooting, where I don't even know how it was deemed self-defense. Honestly, I think I saw 3 perps. I saw 3 collars. I'm not saying that the gun charge for shooting, but I saw 3 collars there for the stabbing. There was a female who stabbed the one guy in the back. I don't want to play the video. Everybody's seen it. The video's viral. It's been viewed hundreds of millions of times. No reason to talk about it. But the horrific shooting where someone got shot in the head after he got stabbed, FYI, he pulled out a gun. The gun got wrestled away from him, and then the person who attempted to stab him originally shot him. So here's Kaz Daughtry speaking about it.
Police Commissioner Caban, Chief Maggi, has also tasked me to look for new technology that we can implement down here in the transit system, which I'm currently doing. I'm searching the globe trying to find new technology that we can use down here to help keep New Yorkers safe. We all heard about what happened yesterday, but nobody's talking about the millions and thousands of people that got to their destination safe. So we let this one incident, and I know that it's going to leave a traumatic experience on the people that were affected by this. But also, there was people that got to their destination safely. So millions of people that got to their destination safely. And like the chief said, the 8-4 precinct officers and the transit response team were doing a Tom's check, right? Where the officer parks their car, they walk downstairs, and they go check on the platform. As the officer hit that first platform, he heard the shot. They immediately took out their weapons, and as people were running up the stairs, they were running towards danger. So these officers should be commended for what they did, because they didn't know what they were getting into. They heard 4 gunshots and immediately thought the worst thing was going to happen, and they went towards danger. So I applaud these officers.
All right, so we'll take just a couple questions. As you know, this is still an active investigation.
You know what, John? Let me speak on this for a moment here. First of all, I find this speech extremely defensive, which is a huge problem when you're in leadership. And yes, is he defending the police officers for doing their job? Yes, he's probably saying it. But what I believe he's actually doing in his mind, which I don't know what's going on in his mind, but I'm just making my assessment, I believe he's actually defending himself. And that's what I find is a problem here. Yes, do the police officers go with the fire? Do they put themselves in danger? Of course they do. I was a cop. John, you were a cop. But can we stop always patting ourselves on the back? Yes, that's what we're supposed to do. That's what we get paid to do. I always used to tell my cops this. And John, I wonder if you used to say the same thing. I used to tell my cops, we don't get paid for what we do. We get paid for what we might have to do. Because ultimately, the reality is most of the day of a police officer is probably extremely boring for most. followed by 2 seconds of excitement, because that's what you get paid for. Yes, they go into fire, but that's what they're supposed to do. Can we stop always patting them on the back for that? I did it myself, John, you did it. They're supposed to do it. We chose to do it. Yes, should they be commended for going above and beyond? But going to the train station because they heard shots is not going above and beyond. They're supposed to do that. That's why we're trained. That's why we have those guns. But let's stop with this defensiveness. Let's be honest. That was a havoc situation, scary for those people. Why are we not saying that must have been a horrific moment for those people that were on that train? We are going to do everything in our power so this does not happen again. But since we are talking about it, what I would like to talk about is exactly what you said, because I don't believe this is a self-defense situation. I would like to mention one name, and then I want to hear your thoughts. Daniel Penny.
Absolutely. I mean, I've said it in the past. Daniel Penny, exactly what happened to Daniel Penny falls under clear picture of self-defense. It's exactly what you would want to happen if your wife was on a train, your mother was on a train, your elderly parent was on a train, your disabled child was on a train, and there was a maniac saying he was going to stab someone. Now, do you want the guy to lose his life? No. But he lost his life as a result of his own actions. Daniel Penny also was charged. He was indicted. DA Alvin Bragg indicted Daniel Penny. But there were 2 other individuals who acted in concert with helping Daniel Penny to restrain that male, and they were not charged. Very, very shows that there is an agenda. There is a legal agenda. There's a prosecuting agenda, and politics are heavily involved in everything that goes on in New York City, all the way through the criminal justice system. And again, this NYPD administration continues to call Alvin Bragg and DAs just like him their partner, continues to defend him, and then, but they'll call out a judge even though they didn't call out the right one. I mean, clear as day, New York City is lost. Again, I've said it 1,000 times. DA Alvin Bragg's motto from the Manhattan DA's office is one standard of justice for all. And we don't see that at all. We see multi-tiered levels of justice depending what you look like, depending what you believe, who you vote for, what your last name is. New York City is lost. And that is exactly why this administration hates this podcast, because you know why? When they listen to it, they agree with 99% of everything we're saying, but they don't want people to hear it. They tell their wives, they tell their children the same thing that we're talking about, but they go on TV and they tell the public something else. And honestly, they're disgusting, and they just project it onto us. And that's why I truly don't, I have no hate for them, and I have no love for them. I honestly, I pity them. I pity them. I wouldn't trade places with them in a million years.
Let's talk about mindset, right? So in a courtroom, so the public understands it, unless they have an understanding of how the law works. Mindset is very important when it comes to law. And mostly what we talk about when it comes to law, especially assaults, is intent. So let's talk about this potential self-defense situation in comparison to Daniel Penny. Daniel Penny was a passenger on the subway. His intent was to go from point A to point B. He was unarmed. In comparison to these riders of the subway, they were both armed with guns and knives. So just right there, just making that comparison, what was their mindset and what was their intent? Because why are they carrying weapons? Now, their argument could be, well, the subways are extremely safe, and that's going to counteract what the police department is saying to the public, that your perception is not reality. But again, they are still armed with illegal weapons, illegal contraband in comparison to Daniel Penny. These were much more mutual combatants than Daniel Penny. So again, diversity has penetrated the justice system. It is alarming. It really pains me, and I'm quite perturbed when I hear Mayor Eric Adams, but yet I expected more from him. But when I hear it from John Schell, Tariq Shepard, Jeffrey Madry, and Kaz Daughtry publicly say that they partner with Alvin Bragg, I find it disgusting and despicable. Because would they say this behind closed doors when this is the same district attorney that is prosecuting good police officers doing the job that they asked them to do?
Absolutely. You know, it's honestly, it's a travesty. It's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. Remember, I put out a tweet a while back when Shepard was the CEO of the 2-8, and he was thanking Alvin Bragg for his partnership. And I basically tweeted, congratulations, I guess you're getting promoted, but there is zero partnership, as he just indicted 2 New York City police officers for doing their job, responding to a 911 call and doing what New Yorkers expect them to do. So I don't know exactly what you're thanking him for, but congratulations on the promotion, I get. And he was promoted not even a month later. You know, not even a month later after putting out that tweet. So it just shows it's compliance. It's not the truth. This is a political agenda. They're taking crime personally. They cannot handle any criticism, and they're trying to intimidate their critics. Again, myself and Eric were targeted by their number one team, their team that they send out on the street to go get gun collars. They sent their captain, 2 lieutenants, sergeants, their legal team, and cops and detectives coming on our social media in an attempt to threaten and intimidate us and coerce us into shutting down the podcast by slandering us, making up lies, defaming us, just completely challenging us to fight, just completely unprofessional things. But they didn't even know what they were against. I was like, hey, what did we say that you guys are so upset? They couldn't tell us, and they all did it simultaneously while they were at work. And they were sent, and they were talking, and they were all talking, and we have the conversations, and we have put it out there in the past. They were talking through Kaz Daughtry and John Schell. I mean, so that was their first attempt to silence us. Then the following attempt after that is we have Sal Greco come on the show. Sal Greco talks about articles that Joe Hoft had put out, and he talks about a place called Consofritos that the police commissioner brother owns with a known criminal. And he talks about the hypocrisy in that. And we speak about that. And then I get threatened months after that podcast happens. How do you get my name? He didn't watch that podcast. Who gave him my name? Was it the police commissioner? Damn sure was. Damn sure was. So this is New York City. This is what's going on. So as a result of that complaint, Eric, I think we should get it. I think we should start to talk about the article now, and as a result, and exactly what the up to date is on that complaint that we put in. So, you know, I believe that the messaging to the men and women of the New York City Police Department to not interact with us on social media, the fact that they have people going through our social media to identify active cops who are liking and sharing our memes and posts. And in an attempt again to silence us, to prevent our First Amendment rights, and for trying to keep this podcast from growing, which they're failing miserably at, by the way. But you know, let's get into it. Let's get into the complaint. Let's get into what's going on with it.
So before I get to the complaint, I'd like to even backtrack more just to show the disdain for this podcast, because we are so accurate. And ultimately, John Schell has legitimized everything that we say. So before I get attacked on this, because this is what happened, what sparked everything with when it started with John's Instagram himself, was John Schell tried to initiate contact with John on LinkedIn. So I just want to say I'm not on LinkedIn myself, but numerous independent sources who I will keep anonymous to protect their identity from the police department have sent me a message that John Schell had put out on LinkedIn. And what it said, what ultimately I think is a response to Kaz Daughtry's speech here that you just put out in regards to the subway incident. And basically what he said, I just want to, in sum and substance, what he said was that they have a hard job to do and that people should understand that. And if those in retirement, which obviously is directly referred to John and myself, and that's why independent sources had messaged me this, is that they would love to come back to the job, and could they do it the same way that they're doing? So obviously, you know what? And I will respond with this. if we were given an opportunity to come back to the job to be in a leadership position, of course we would take it. But we would operate from a place of humility, and we would operate with a place of concern and compassion for the residents of New York City, and ultimately the best interests of the men and women of the police department, not our weak, egotistical, self-driven, perpetuating careers. So let's talk about that. In this particular article, the weight of the police department has been brought upon this podcast to suppress our First Amendment speech. There was a meme, a moniker identified as "All Cops Are Woke" on Instagram that was threatening this podcast, which we were confident is a member of the service, an active member of the service of the NYPD. John and I were pretty tolerant of the attacks that we were getting on social media, along with the citywide response team of the police department, which we have credible evidence that we have that there's a nexus to Kaz Daughtry and John Schell of how these attacks are happening. I also was attacked on my personal cell phone from this person who's an active member. Also, this person had insinuated that they have a problem with the owner of Casa Fritos being shut down. So this all ties in together. And with these attacks, they continue. And of course, we made a complaint to the Internal Affairs Division. Eventually, once our families, which included our kids, were threatened. So now we've been in contact with the Internal Affairs. This investigation has been very short of transparent. It has been, we believe it's been narrowed and led in a specific direction to avoid the upper echelon of the police department. All Cops Are Woke is an active member of the service, or was. As a result, this active member has resigned from the police department. But what's extremely problematic is that the Internal Affairs Division has not released the identity to us. So those threats still remain real, and it's alarming.
Absolutely. So to put in perspective, we're complainants, we're complainant victims, right? There were numerous indirect threats towards our children. Pictures of 2 little girls, Brown, my daughter's age. Oh, you have a beautiful family. I hope they live a long life. Picture of a little blonde kid with his mother. Same innuendo, something about I hope they live a long life, something like that. Pictures of a map of Florida of this person who pretended that they were in Nebraska, a security guard from Nebraska coming down to Florida, zip tape, duct ties, all of this. And what we alleged to the, and when I don't even say alleged, what we told the NYPD Internal Affairs, we said these
Well,
are
we charged. We charged them.
Exactly. That they are active members. They're active members behind this account. Not one, multiple. There's multiple active members behind this account. And this account is tied in to the threats I received from that restaurant owner. As Eric had said, it was one of the things that he put out. Another indirect threat was, you tried to shut down my boss's business. Now me and the CEOs are coming after you, right? Was one of the indirect threats. So we said, listen, we understand that these are indirect threats, but we believe when you take the totality of the circumstances and the totality of this person's account, that is clearly only set up to target myself, Eric Dim, and any type of social media that comes out on the podcast. We would literally, I would time it. I would put some piece of content out, or Eric would put some piece of content out, and within seconds, All Cops Are Woke would respond. Within seconds, he would put up stuff to try to debunk what we were saying. So we knew exactly that the threats were towards our kids, and so did everyone else, because everyone was sending like, oh my God, this guy's like unhinged. It's completely unhinged. So we believe those are direct threats towards us. And more than the legal criminal ramifications of anything, does this person deserve to wear a badge and a gun and a shield, or anyone that was behind it, or anyone that knows about it and not saying it? Do these people deserve to be New York City police officers? I don't believe so. I don't believe so. I don't want to see anyone lose their career, but I also don't want to see an unhinged person have a career and profit from New York City while their sole purpose in life is to attack this podcast, because we believe that most of these threats were happening while they were on duty. So about 3 days ago, we were back in contact with Internal Affairs, and we've kept it pretty private, and we were planning on keeping the whole thing private. But so they tell us that a person received disciplinary action. They wouldn't tell us a name. They wouldn't tell us a rank. And that person is no longer with the New York City Police Department. But that's supposed to make us feel better. So, of course, we're like, so somebody lost their career. Somebody lost their career. You're not going to tell us the name of who was the owner of the account. We believe that it's multiple individuals, but I still want to know the name of the owner of the account. And they said no, because they're worried about us retaliating, and they're worried about the liability of telling us who threatened our children. They're not worried about the liability of our families or our children or our lives. They're only worried about the liability of the person that's the perpetrator. And then we were instructed to file complaints where we live, when we clearly know where the threat originated from. The threat originated from New York City, and some of them while this person was employed and actively signed in as a member of the New York City Police Department.
Absolutely. So it's interesting. So John and I have been in contact with Internal Affairs, and what we're being told is that as this is an active investigation, that the information cannot be disclosed to us, which we find far stretched from the truth and what we know has happened in the past. In the past, if any complainants or victims have a complaint of a potential perpetrator or an adversary, that information is going to be released to the victim. And we were told that we should be at ease because this person has been identified and they're now no longer employed by the police department. I actually find it even more alarming now that this person has been relieved from the police department and we do not know the identity, which makes it even worse. At this point, we do know by the social media post of this active member of the police department, they are completely unhinged. This goes against every grain of the police department. We know that we had taken an oath of the police department and any active members right now. John and I received numerous texts. People were shocked, saying there's no way this is an active member. Absolutely. No one wanted to believe it, and I can understand that. No one wants to believe that anyone wearing the same badge and shield that they wear and also a firearm is also employed in the same organization that they are. But yes, this person is an active member of the police department. You know, when John and I were on the job, and I'm sure the cops watching right now, you know, if someone is the victim of a burglary or an assault or harassment, the identity of that perpetrator, that person of interest is going to be released to the victim for your safety. And what we were told is that there is liability that we could potentially retaliate, and that's why they can't release the information. That's completely alarming here. And my question is this: if there was two other civilians that were not retired members of the service, would the information be released? And I say absolutely. I'm confident that information released. But I believe that John and I are being treated much different in this investigation because we are retired members of the service, which I find extremely problematic. And I think this is completely alarming. Because now John and I are in a position that we do not know the identity of this person. And this person losing their career because we charge that they targeted this podcast and made specific threats. I mean, John and I were receiving prank phone calls on a daily basis. To me, is even more of a threat now than even before. So along with that, let's talk about the actual investigation of aggravated harassment. Now, we both know, and anyone watching this, that where the threats originated from, that's where the investigation will commence. But we are being told to file in Florida, which I think is absolutely ridiculous. I think the sheriffs would just look at us sideways and laugh in our face and say, this doesn't make any sense. The NYPD knows the identity of this person. The threats originated from New York City, and potentially they were happening on duty. Why would the sheriffs in Florida investigate this case? What are your thoughts, Sean?
There's absolutely no reason for this case to be in Florida. And not only, this is a 2-month-old investigation at this point. Not only Did they not give us the name? They know details that they know much more details than they're giving us. And there's so much. I'd love to know, was this person interviewed? Did this person get GL-15? What were the questions asked in that GL-15? Because I'll tell you right now, I believe that there's going to be omissions in that. I believe that there's going to be omissions in there to not connect any other member of service to this account, or especially the upper echelon. And I also believe that this person was warned to vest out and leave. That's another thing that I believe that either himself, his union rep, he or she, because I don't want to make any allegations about the thing, because officially the police department doesn't tell victims who people are. So for 2 months, they waited to tell us that they didn't file a criminal complaint for us. They didn't file an aggravated harassment complaint, nor did they do the routine, just a harassment, and file the harassment. When clearly anyone could see the totality of the circumstances, those indirect threats were made directly to us. And if he would have been questioned, he would have admitted it, leading it to be aggravated harassment, right, over the computer. So this whole investigation is being narrowed in, and we're being treated like our lives don't matter, our children's lives don't matter, but we should worry about the liability of the New York City Police Department telling the person's name to us who threatened our children, who said that they hope our kids live a long life. They hope my daughter, Eric's son, my 2 daughters, that they live long lives. Our wives live long lives, that they're going to take duct tapes and all this other stuff and come down to Florida and all this, but they won't tell us the name of it. Officially won't tell us the name. Can't tell us anything. Active investigation. Big deal. But now they're telling us 2 months in, they didn't file a criminal complaint. They didn't file a harassment complaint. Go to your local sheriff and tell them you want to file a report against an unknown individual, and tell them that IAB knows the identity, and they'll tell the local sheriff the identity. And then if the sheriff wants to, they could tell us the identity. Is like, I don't know who they think they're talking to. I don't know who they believe they are, like that they could just not basically do an investigation against members of their own. And again, I believe this person was instructed to leave the New York City Police Department, so that now he isn't their own, and now he's more of a danger, he or she, and they, the other people involved in this, are more of a danger to myself, Eric Dim, our families, our children. And they basically endangered our lives even further by covering this up and doing an improper investigation, omitting questions, omitting evidence. And I'm honestly very, very unhappy. And I'll tell you right now, I'm going to make the claim. I read Edwin Raymond's book, and he said that IAB cannot effectively police itself. And I'm going to say it right here. IAB cannot effectively investigate any allegations when it comes to a high-ranking member of the service. If it's against the lieutenant, if it's against the sergeant, if it's against any of that, yes. If when it comes to the police commissioner, these politically appointed 3-star, 1-star, the high-ranking inspectors that are close to the mayor, they have no ability to effectively investigate that.
So normally what we see in the New York City Police Department is when an incident happens, we see it time and time again, that the actual boots on the ground, the police officer or the sergeant or lieutenant that's involved in a critical incident ultimately gets the entire blame for an incident. We never see the upper echelon take blame and take responsibility and say, how do we move forward? This is how we are going to move forward. Let's use the incident of Hugh Barry, Sergeant Hugh Barry. Let's use that as a comparison to this case. Sergeant Hugh Barry was trained to shoot someone who's in possession of a bat, using it as a weapon. He did as he was paid and trained to do, and he was sold out to accept responsibility and accountability on his own. The leadership never said, this is how we train our police officers. In order to move forward, we are going to make a new plan and we're going to analyze this. No, instead they blamed Sergeant Hugh Barry, and he took the blame for himself. And the reason why I made this comparison, I believe that all cops are woke is not acting alone. John and I both spoke about this offline many times. We are confident all cops are woke is not acting alone. We are confident that they are acting on behalf with and consorting with the upper echelon based on the social media posts that we have, based on the conversations. It's obvious there is a nexus to the higher ups of the police department. And we believe that if this person, despite whatever rank they are, was questioned, it was narrowed, and have this person immediately leave the police department to close out the case, to disengage any connection to anyone that's higher up in the police department that has something to do with this case. This is a completely flawed investigation because our complaint includes numerous upper echelon of the police department, and who's being investigated? The same bureau that is overseen by the same people who are making allegations. And even in conversation, we were told, well, I have to check with my higher ups. And I even said, well, what do you mean by higher ups?
The higher
No,
ups.
my command. Right, the higher ups. And John and I both know that anytime the higher ups of internal affairs are referred to, usually they're referred to as the commanding officer or executives, not the higher ups. So this is a completely flawed investigation. We believe it's being deterred into a specific narrow lane. Have this person removed from the police department, close out the case, and don't show any connection. So that's why I'm going to publicly say this. Out there right now, whoever you are, all cops are woke, or whoever they are, because we believe it's not one person using that handle. You can see the personality traits of someone when they're writing and they're making posts. And we've seen different personalities under all cops are woke. So we have every reason to believe that it's several members that were using that handle. So anyone, if you were on that handle for all cops are woke, we invite you to come on this podcast and tell us exactly what's going on. And if there is a connection, how did this happen? Why is there a connection? Were you told to do this? And how were you allowed to leave the police department in such a quick manner? So we invite you to come on this podcast and we could discuss it and expose that you were actually not acting alone, that the weight of the police department was put on you and that you were pushed to do this. So again, I say it, opposition meets opportunity. So whoever you are, all cops are woke, you're invited to come on this podcast and let's find out your identity and let's expose that you were actually perpetuated and pushed and forced to do this.
And by the way, just so we're aware, we're very familiar with all cops are woke, with all the accounts that are surrounding him, Stevie Guns, a bunch of other names I can't remember off the top of my head, but we know exactly who you all are. We just
Sean
don't
Lisco.
know. Sean Lisco. We just don't know officially because we can't do the investigation, right? The NYPD must complete this investigation. They must complete the criminal investigation as well as the internal investigation. But if you guys become men and come on here and talk about it, we won't see criminal charges. But I'll tell you right now, I don't care, and Eric doesn't care what the NYPD says. We will take this to a higher authority if we're not told exactly who, what, where, when, and why. That needs to happen. The public needs to know. This is a major, major corruption scandal in the NYPD. This is absolutely disgusting to target 2 retired lieutenants who break down analysis on policy, legislation, politics, who do book reviews. We give retired members a chance to come on and memorialize their career. This is absolute corruption and insanity from the New York City Police Department, and it's being allowed to happen. And every angle there is that the New York City Police Department complains, integrity, that they have integrity, their elite special investigations unit. They're special, all right, but I don't think their investigations are, but they're definitely special. They need to actually take what we're saying seriously, because obviously exactly what we said is exactly what was happening, right? We have the proof of all of everything else we said. We have all the stuff. So we didn't pull this stuff out of thin air. And then even further, what's going on, I mean, this is an absolute travesty, and it's a blight on this badge, on the iconic patch, on the New York City Police Department. I thought we were better than that. I thought you guys were better than that. I thought Kaz Daughtry, John Schell, Ed Caban, Jeffrey Madry, I thought they were better than that too. And you know what? I was sadly mistaken. Absolutely disgusting.
Shame on all of them. Anyone that knew the identity of All Cops Are Woke, especially when we were getting threats to our families, which included kids, pictures of duct tape, zip ties, threatening our families. You could say they're indirect threats, but I say they're direct threats because it all ties in together. And I took it as a direct threat. And I tell you right now, anyone that knew and you didn't say anything, shame on you. You're no friend of mine. And I'm sure when you see me in public, you won't even acknowledge it. You'll probably shake my hand and pretend you never knew and pretend you're a friend of this podcast. But that's okay. You have to live with yourself. We don't. But again, I'm going to say it. All cops are woke, whoever you are. I invite you on this podcast. John invites you on this podcast because we are confident you did not act solely on your own and that you were put in a position to do this. So why not let's expose that? Because they're exposing you. They're allowing you to give up your career and give the perception. We talk about perception, right? When it comes to crime, they want the perception that you acted alone and you completely took this on yourself to target this podcast, which I think is completely insanity. Because if you did act on your own, you need some serious help. There is something wrong with you. But I'm confident you did not. Because there is still some part of you that has some normalcy. Because once you felt that the walls were caving in on you and it started to crumble, you did get nervous because you shut down the podcast, which means that you actually are in fear of consequence. So there's still some normalcy to you. So again, I invite you, All Cops Are Woke, who you are or who they are, to come on this podcast. Opposition meets opportunity. We can have a discussion and let's expose how the leadership of this police department put you up to this. And if you don't, I will take it as you acted alone. And that's okay. I won't take it personal. But believe me, this is alarming, and we are going to find out who you are. We are going to protect ourselves and protect our families.
And again, like I said to the captain and the lieutenants on the CRT team, you're leading these young guys to their own destruction. You're ruining their careers, which they all have ruined people's careers in the past. So let's get that straight. They've tainted. One of them's actually the two lieutenants are both very tainted on this job. Definitely not people of integrity that should be in the position they're in. But whatever, that's the guys that John Schell likes to surround himself with. So we'll keep those people there, right? Everyone that everyone hates, the cops hate, they don't trust, they don't want to work with. Those are the guys that you should have. The one that the public says are dirty, that they steal things from. Those are the guys you should have around you, John, because you're very smart. But I told all of them, I said, you're leading these young guys to ruin their career, because the last thing I wanted to do and the last thing that Eric wanted to do was file a complaint, and even go anywhere. We were laughing it off. Like, these guys are crazy. Like, this guy's a captain. This is a lieutenant in the New York City Police Department. You're coming to bat to fight because your boss sent you, because he got a meme. That was a meme that he didn't like, or he didn't like a podcast that we did and we didn't said something. Come on the show, talk about it. You're big grown men. Come on the show. No, they didn't do that. No, they made up lies, slander, acted like tough guys. And for what? And they couldn't even tell us why. They didn't even know what we said that they didn't agree with. And exactly what we said is what happened, right? People's careers are being destroyed. Exactly like I said. You will not be a cop. Mark my words. And that's what happened, right? Now you specifically are no longer a cop, but all the people that were with you, they're still going to get big pensions. They're going to get big health benefits. They're going to get all that stuff. And, you took one for the team, guy. What team? There's no team here. There's no team. There's no team. There's no honor amongst thieves. And clearly what we see is this podcast is being targeted. So I think, the article, I appreciate the New York Post. I appreciate Rich Calder, who wrote it. I always appreciate Tina Moore and her articles. I think that they narrow in and they're not afraid to put out what's going on in the New York City Police Department. So I appreciate them. but I don't think it even scratches the surface of actually what's going on.
No, absolutely. I think that this story is it's a good story. It's kind of vague. It leaves out a lot of information, but it's a good step in the right direction. I think this will be the first of many. Eventually, when things get exposed, what happens in the dark happens in the light. I'm pretty confident that All Cops Are Woke may come on this podcast or may not, but eventually, once the identity of All Cops Are Woke realizes that the weight of this attack on this podcast has been left in his or her lap to take the fall and take the blame for the entire thing, and the investigation will be closed, and he or she will be left sitting there like, wow, how did this happen? Because we know that you did not act alone. And if you did, you have some serious mental issues. But again, I'm confident you did not act on your own. And on behalf of the other members that defended All Cops Are Woke, shame on you. Shame on you, Sean Lisco, and many others who got on the social media and referred to John and I as rats. We have absolutely no loyalty to you. Let's explain something. A rat is someone that you commit a crime with and then they give you up. We didn't commit a crime here. You attacked us. You brought this upon yourself. Shame on you. You don't even deserve that badge to act in this manner, because we would never do that. Completely immature and unhinged and unstable. How do you walk around with a gun and a shield, and this is how you act on social media? It's absolutely disgusting, despicable. Shame on you. I have no loyalty to any of those. Honestly, in my eyes, if you can act in that manner, you're not a cop to me. You didn't swear an oath. And if you did, you don't understand what that oath is.
I think that's a major problem in policing. I think that's probably the biggest problem that we have in policing and that we have in the leadership. You know, it's just a routine. You go there, you swear this oath. I swear before God, I'll uphold the Constitution of the United States of America and the Constitution of the United States of New York in the rank of blank, whatever that thing is. Now, we have guys that have sworn that oath, I don't know, 8 times, 9 times. Kaz Daughtry's done it 4 times in 4 years. He's about to do his 5th soon. And I don't think they know what they're swearing. And I just think it's routine. I think it's just something, because I don't really believe that they're swearing an oath to the Constitution, because if they did, the vaccine mandate would have never happened. I'll tell you that. You know, people's First Amendment rights. And, you know, and again, everyone's like, oh, all you had to do was take it. I was like, no, that's not all I had to do. I would have had to fire people that didn't take it. I would have had to coerce other people to take it. I'm like, so that's not all I had to do was just take it. There was a lot of stuff that went against what I know to be legal and what I know to be moral, right? When there's women sitting in my office crying, Lou, I don't want to put this in my body. As a man, I see my mother, I see my daughters, I see my wife, I see my grandmother, I see the little old lady up the block, and I'm going to sit there and force her to put something in her body. So I think that showed, that was a clear line. It was bigger than even when they put out this diversity, equity, inclusion unit, and they told all the executives, this is the new way. You will go this route, because if you don't, you might as well put your papers in today, because you're done here. And that they did that. They had an all-in, and I forget the exact year. I believe it was 2019 or maybe 2018, and they had that all-in, and they basically gave them all a good talking to. You will take the knee. You will bow the head. And that's basically what they did. And then we see them bow the head in 2020. We see them take the knee, right? They took the knee to people who were burning our city, looting our stores. They took a knee and bent for what? Endangered your lives, weakened the New York City Police Department, emasculated us. And then further, when it came to the mandate, they just put the blinders on. Everything's good. Everything's fine. We don't have to pretend. And still today, you know, there's people that are terminated. They're not going to get, they have no health benefits. They have no salary because of this. And you never hear any of this. So John Schell sits there and he says, we wish that we would be a member of the New York City Police Department. I do. I wish that I was still a member of the New York City Police Department, but just not under your leadership, not under this current regime. There is absolutely no way in hell that I would work for you. I don't care how much money was involved. I wouldn't sell my soul and bow down. I would advise you. I would come and work, but I know exactly the way you targeted this podcast. I know exactly what would happen to myself and Eric Dim if we stepped a foot on that street. There would be drummed up investigations on us every breath we took. So there's absolutely no way that we could come back under your regime because and honestly, I wouldn't want to because you've proven to be an immoral, cowardly, and corrupt regime. All of yous, and I would never work for either of yous, and I'm glad that I don't. I actually had a dream the other night that I got reinstated, and I had to work for you, and when I woke up, I said, thank God. I thanked God. I got on my knees and I prayed that I was brave enough and smart enough to stick to my guns, that I don't have to deal with immoral men, and I would have never made my 20 years anyway. So whatever. I made 18. I'll chalk it up. God saved me. He pulled me out of that situation. He saved Eric. He gave us all time to be with our families and to work on our passions and things we love and pursue other journeys. And that's exactly what we're doing. So no, John, we don't wish that we were back at all. I'm very happy. We're the first form of this new type of media. And it's the first form of police officers, supervisors, lieutenants being analysts. Actual real time, not real crime, real time police analysts. And that's exactly what we are. And there's plenty of other people popping up. And this platform is going to go a lot bigger than you guys could ever imagine. So I appreciate you. I thank you. Eric thanks you. Our families thank you.
You know, it's interesting, right? I always say that their perception that they have indicated to the public is not reality. I believe it's actually deception. And I think that's the problem that they have also with this podcast is that we're not deceiving the public, is that we're telling the public the truth. We've actually counteracted and challenged the misinformation that they provided to the public. In the admissions, we've actually provided those we filled in the blanks for the public. So with that being said, also that message that John Shell had put on LinkedIn is very telltale to me and has some subliminal messages in it. And what I believe is that ultimately in their hearts, and I believe in John Shell's heart, and John, you might agree, is they know that you and I should both be employed by the New York City Police Department, and we should be climbing those ranks because they know that not only do we have knowledge, but we have the potential and the capabilities to far out succeed John Shell himself and the other upper echelon of the police department as we speak. So deep down, they know that we should actually be there. They know that we should have never left our careers, but we did because we were not defended by the New York City Police Department. We were not supported, and I'm very proud and happy with our decision, and we've really found a bigger and better path. But with that being said, what did they also say? What did he also say in that message is, he said, if we were to come back, how would we do things? So that's why I like to ask you that question, John. Let's imagine that you and I are reinstated as deputy commissioners of the New York City Police Department. If you were at that podium, what would you tell the public?
I would tell them the exact truth. I would explain how crime works, that sometimes crime goes up, sometimes crime goes down. And I would actually tell them the tactics that we're deploying. I wouldn't be talking about new technology. I wouldn't be talking about anything. I would bring in this new technology. It's really vital. It's a vital, vital form of technology. It's called proactive policing. It's called a UF 250 form, even though John Shell says it never went away. It went away. It went away that we do it properly. It went out a way that we do it in a way that is conducive to fighting crime. So all of those things went away. And by the way, I think what they're doing to go online and push back is a good strategy. I just don't think that John Shell, Kaz Daughtry, or anyone else other than the New York City Police Commissioner should be up there doing that. I mean, because again, we presented that idea to them. We said we would go up there. We would go up there on that platform daily, and we would read out, this person was arrested last night. DA Alvin Bragg's office did this. Maybe it wouldn't be the police commissioner Caban, but I would have one person to reach shepherd I would have him. He's the DC, he's the Deputy Commissioner of Public Information. That's all he's ever been his whole entire career. He, soft hands, tender hands shepherd. He, besides cream in his hands and wearing nice fancy suits and DCPI, hasn't really done any police work. So he should be well trained enough to go up there on the podium and talk about what's actually going on. But they don't do that. Their PR, their messaging is all off base. I think that is a good strategy. But they can't do it because they can't tell the truth. So when you can't tell the truth, you can't actually do what myself and Eric Dim are doing. Because if you can't say what's actually going on in your own heart and what you're talking about behind closed doors and what works, you have to spin it into this progressive format. It's never going to make sense to anybody, and it doesn't. And that's why the memes are so easy. That's why I always say the memes make themselves, because they do. Again, that post was put out, that John Shell put out, was after I put out a post to Kaz Daughtry and I quoted him. I mean, the majority of the stuff that we put out is quotes from New York City Mayor Eric Adams, quotes from members of New York City Council, quotes from the upper echelon of the NYPD. It's just quotes. It's them saying it, and we just put it out. And they're infuriated by it. I didn't say it. Eric didn't say it. You said it.
Absolutely. Well, if I was in a position on the podium, I would use keywords. Is not I or they. I would start saying we. We have analyzed what's working and what's not working, and I would say we have a problem with the legislation that's been enacted, but we will figure out how to work under these horrible circumstances to keep the public safe. And how I would do that is exactly what I was saying earlier. Is that we will support our cops from civil liability with these frivolous lawsuits, and we will bypass the Civilian Complaint Review Board and dismiss these nonsense cases so that our cops can do intrusive police work. Intrusive police work, or proactive, whatever terminology you want to use, is the bedrock and foundation to deterring crime, to bring the city back to where it is. We need to do intrusive police work. And then again, I agree with John. Expose the legislation, expose the DA's office, expose the Civilian Complaint Review Board to show how they're attacking the cops so that they can't do the job, so that they get the residents of New York City on their side to vote for the politicians that will support the police department to keep them safe, so that we're not in this position. But again, I would say this is what we have to do. We are going out there in full force. We are going to protect you. We are not going to support Daniel Penny being indicted, because we have to do this together. The cops have to do it, and I would give them the reality. Cops can't be on every train. The citizens will be supported also. We don't need vigilantes out there, but we have to support Daniel Penny. I don't support this incident that just happened on the train right now. These were mutual combatants. They have weapons. What is their intent? Their minds are somewhere else. I support Daniel Penny. I support common sense. And we have to start using words as we can do this together, and how we're going to do it, not by being defensive. We have to acknowledge that we have a mass exodus. We have to acknowledge that this mandate hurt the police department, the post-Georgia flex, that it's going to hurt for years to come, and stop letting progressive politics penetrate the police department. But since we would say that, we would be removed shortly. We would not be there very long. And I would also say, if we were fortunate enough to take the position of police commissioner and first deputy commissioner, I would have John Shell, Kaz Daughtry, and Jeffrey Mandry resign and retire immediately.
Yeah, I mean, I personally believe when it comes to the messaging, there's no follow through, right? There's no follow through. Crime's down. No, it's not. Crime's down in subways. No, it's not. There's no follow through on anything. They tell you crime's down. They tell you that, we're going to work in partnership now and to bring crime down. This is what we're doing. And transit crime rises. And then you look at something like this, right? This was in the news today. New York City Burger King hit with $15 million lawsuit accused of allowing open-air drug bazaar run by professional dealers. I mean, if this does not highlight a failure in public safety in New York City policy, I don't know what does. So now these corporations, small mom and pop shops who pay tremendous amount of rent, tremendous amount of taxes, They pay all of this money to operate in New York City. They get none of the benefit of operating in New York City. They get none of the benefit from the tax revenue. That tax revenue goes to fund the New York City Council. It goes to fund the New York City Police Department. It goes to fund DA Alvin Bragg's office. And they're being left out to dry. And so now they're being told, we're going to sue you. Why is this group suing Burger King? They should be suing New York City Mayor Eric Adams, his entire staff, including the New York City Police Department, DA Alvin Bragg, and the entire city council for allowing a criminal first society to happen. This now the businesses have to worry about policing crime inside of their stores too. Eric, what do you think about that?
I have a huge problem with this. I mean, we're relying on the retail establishments to protect themselves. So basically what we're saying is that they have to spend more money. They have to have private security. They need to have everything on lockdown. I mean, what is that going to affect? It's going to affect the consumer, all the residents of New York City. If they have to start paying for a complete private security force, that's going to make the value of the goods cost more. The labor of the people working there, the consumer has to pay more for goods. It's absolutely ridiculous. The burden is on New Yorkers. I mean, it's funny, right? Because that's more of like a libertarian type society, but yet this is supposed to be a city run by Democrats. I think this is completely just insanity. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. The laws that they enacted have caused these problems, and now they're putting the blame on them. It's almost like if you had overweight kids and you stack your entire house with cookies and potato chips, and you say, I don't understand why you guys are getting fat and you're overweight. It doesn't make any sense. We're feeding them this nonsense, and then we're also blaming them for the outcome.
Yeah, it's a huge failure in public, and you won't hear a word from this about the New York City Police Department. Well, you know, Eric Adams will go to a town hall. We'll tell Kaz. Kaz will be like, yeah, we're going to send people out. But this stuff should happen without it getting media attention. This stuff should happen. These operations should happen without the public ever knowing about it, without the New York Post ever having to put it out, or the Daily News ever having to put it out, or myself and Eric having to talk about it, because this is what normally would happen, right? The residents, because I believe we always did community policing, even in the height of broken windows. What would happen is the community would make complaints. If we had numerous complaints at a location, we would go in there and handle that. I've done numerous SNU operations myself. You know, although I'm touted with not having any CCRBs, I actually have a few from one particular SNU operation that actually happens not to be on 50A. But this is not hard to do. I mean, we have narcotics teams still operating, right, in New York City. So why is there not a kite at this location? Why are we not doing controlled buys at this location? Why are we not set up with a camera to identify the drug dealers, to watch the sales, actually getting a warrant for inside the place if this is going on, and trying to cooperate with Burger King, trying to have Burger King actually cooperate with us to allow their establishment to once again be a place that New York City residents and tourists want to patronize. Because I'll tell you right now, I don't know anything about their books, but I guarantee it's a losing proposition for Burger King and that owner right now. I guarantee they're not making money, because if there's homeless and drug dealers sitting in that location, I could guarantee you they're not one of the most profitable Burger Kings in the nation. And they should be, because of where they are and which city they are. I mean, this city's hard to kill. It's a hard to kill city, but Eric Adams is doing a phenomenal job of it. He's doing a phenomenal job of destroying it. It is absolutely, it's painful to watch not only what's going on in the New York City Police Department, but it's painful to watch what's going on in New York City, because this is not hard stuff. This is not hard stuff. Anybody without a police background, or without even a background in New York City, could come up with common sense policies and legislation and criminal justice system that would fall within our Constitution, that would fall and to protect the constitutional rights of all Americans, while at the same time keeping New York City residents safe. And Eric Adams is failing miserably.
Well, Absolutely. That's why I always say, no matter what legislation that's enacted and the politicians that are in office, the bedrock of policing still remains the same. During the era, the Bloomberg era, de Blasio, and now Mayor Eric Adams, you could put any neighborhood coordination officer program, whatever you want to call it, CPOP, which was community policing. If the public doesn't know, it's always the same. It's the same horse, different color. It's always community policing based on concerns of the community. What is it called? Addressing quality of life concerns. What does that come back to? Intrusive police work, proactive police work. And what is the term people always afraid of? Broken windows. The broken windows theory, which really means intrusive and proactive police work, would solve this issue immediately, because we would have police officers interacting and engaging with homeless, mentally ill, those that are loitering in or around that Burger King, and that would shut down this problem pretty quickly. I'm pretty confident that this problem could be addressed, and I'm confident that the franchise owner of Burger King addressed his or her concerns to the New York City Police Department. I find it hard to believe that they wouldn't. I've been to many community meetings as a special operations lieutenant, as an anti-crime sergeant, as a cop. I've been to these meetings. I heard the concerns of the community. And that was something that was always addressed by quality of life enforcement, which was broken windows, intrusive police work. We would address, I'm sure there's people urinating in or around that facility, people littering, loitering. I would be hard pressed to not believe that there's not actual drug use that could be viewed, as you said, from a low level street narcotics enforcement operation. This could be shut down and addressed immediately. But what they're not telling the public is that we have a mass exodus. We don't have enough cops because we have a huge problem in the subway, and we're just constantly displacing cops from one location to another. The cops are overworked. They're overtired. We don't have the manpower. We don't even know what the real manpowers of the police department are. And I believe they're far fewer than what we're actually being told. Also, they're not being supported, because if they do this intrusive police work, they're going to be targeted by the Civilian Complaint Review Board. And now we have the How Many Stops Act that just disengages contact with some of these people at this location. They're not being honest with the public, and they're leaving the public on their own, and they're leaving Burger King and the small enterprises the entire blame. So you have to ask yourself, if you're a business, why would you stay in New York City? You're going to leave New York City and find better pastures.
Absolutely. That's 1,000%. And that's what's going on. I was actually, the only reason I'm wearing the suit is I was just on Newsmax right before we did this, talking about the influx of migrants, illegal migrants, excuse me, and how much money we're paying for this. And what's the benefit of New York City taxpayers? Like, you're paying taxes for what? To have 188,000 illegals come in to bring crime up, to take jobs that you and your children could have had. What is the plan? The plan is that we're just going to take your tax money and support these illegal migrants, when we have people still trying to come into this country legally, people that have spent thousands and thousands of dollars to come here illegally, who have struggled tooth and nail to become a citizen, and who understand what it means to be an American citizen when these people are being given everything. We have people coming here illegally and they're being given everything. And again, this New York City's policies during COVID destroyed people's businesses. It wasn't COVID. It wasn't a respiratory virus that destroyed people's businesses and had them close and lost jobs. It wasn't COVID that did that. It was New York City's response to it. It was Eric Adams' totalitarian response to it, because he doesn't understand the law, because he's never actually enforced it, even though he was a member of the New York City. And even though he drafted the law, he doesn't even understand how it's made or how it works. And he still doesn't understand how his office acts. So we destroyed people's businesses. We lost jobs. We left people out of their careers. We terminated people. We forced people. The financial impact on those people is not even being negotiated or talked about or anything. We're just throwing them to the wind. Forget them. Forget those people. Forget what happened to those people. Forget all the homeless people we have. Forget all the mentally ill people we have. We're just going to give anyone who crossed the border illegally, we're going to give them $388 a day. $10 million a day we're going to spend on illegal migrants. Is this something that a sane household would do? Is this what you would do as a father, as a mother? You bring in your salary, whatever your salary is, let's just say $100,000, and you're going to give 50,000 of it. Your bills are 50,000, and you're going to give 50,000 to somebody else's kids and not your own. No sane home would do this. Oh, and by the way, you only have 4 bedrooms, but you're going to flood your house with hundreds of people to live in there, even though there's only 1 bathroom or 2 bathrooms. No sane individual would do this. And again, another highlight failure. And what do you see? New York City Police Department's all for it, right, John? Right, Mike? You guys are all for it, right? You love it, right? You love it. This is who we are, right? This is who we are.
Well, let's also talk about, and I believe that this is an attack also on the Caucasian community. Let's be honest, under Mayor Eric Adams. The Italian and Jewish community has been attacked for wood-burning pizzas. I think that that's part of it. And it's just a complete sideshow from what's going on. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. And I think what Scott Lebedo was doing in response was outstanding. So what are your thoughts on that?
First of all, I love Scott Lebedo. He just came out with a movie. Sal Greco was just at Mar-a-Lago for the release of that movie, Relentless Patriot. I can't wait to see it. It's in June. I can't wait for it to go live. I love Scott Lebedo. He's a Staten Islander. He's a Mid-Island guy. I won't tell you where you can find him, but good guy. And, great patriot. He's having a pizza party. He's going to feed the homeless and he's going to feed the pigeons at New York City Mayor's Gracie Mansion. So they're going to get together. They're going to feed the pigeons to combat what's going on, the attacks of pizza, bagels, and matzah. I mean, these are staples of New York City community. I don't care if you're Jewish or if you're Italian. These are staples of a New Yorker's diet. Pizza, matzah, bagels. If you don't like all of them, you like one of them. I guarantee it. People come to New York to get the pizza. People come to New York to get the bagels. We have the largest Jewish population in the world outside of Israel. So if you're looking for any cuisine related to Israel or the Jewish culture, that you're coming to New York to get it. And so this is another attack. This is an attack on a ridiculous bill. It was passed in the middle of the night. And I hope that pizza party's big. I hope they feed a lot of the homeless. And I hope they feed a lot of the hungry pigeons too.
Absolutely. Hands down, you just nailed it. It's exactly what I wanted to get into. This stems from the Jewish community and the Italian community, but really what it is ultimately it's being a New Yorker. Every New Yorker, I don't care what your background is. If you're a New Yorker, you're proud to eat New York pizza. You're proud to eat New York bagels, and sure as hell proud to eat New York matzah. I mean, if you go into Katz Deli, which is a staple of New York City, they are famous and known for shipping food from Katz Deli to people around the country. And who are those people? Those are people that are former native New Yorkers that move around the country and they have food shipped from Katz Deli. There's other pizzerias throughout the entire country that actually have locations in different parts of the country, and they have the water from New York shipped so that they can have the same type of pizza from New York. So these are staples of New York. I really do believe that this is an attack on these communities. It's just tearing down the culture of New York City, the brand of New York City that he claims. He's tearing it down. He's trying to create a different brand, the Mayor Eric Adams brand.
Absolutely. So Wednesday, March 20th at noon, City Hall, New York City, the New York Pizza Party Part 2, presented to you by activist Scott Lebedo. Give us pizza or give us death. And again, it's not just about pizza. It's about business owners. Scott's a great patriot. He's funny as hell. I recommend you guys follow him on social media. You will not be disappointed. Even if you don't agree with him, you will not be disappointed. Mark my words. The guy is absolutely hysterical. He tells what he believes and he says it, and he doesn't care what you think about it. So we're hoping we get a big turnout that day at City Hall. Full disclosure, Scott had done this before. If you see on this flyer, he was throwing pizzas over the fence. They did arrest him and winded up summoning him. New York City Mayor Eric Adams contacted another token paleface name of city council who's been dead quiet for the last 3 years by the name of Joe Borelli. He's more of an author and a news media personality than he is a New York City councilman, but he is in charge of New York City Council. He is the minority leader. He's done everything but lead throughout the last 3 years. While looking in Florida for investments because he realizes that his own city's dying. So doing nothing to do that. So Joe Borelli offered to broker a meeting with Scott Lebedo and Eric Adams, and that meeting absolutely never happened because Eric Adams is not a man of his word, and Joe would never push back because obviously Joe, this is in his last term, and he's going to be looking, if Eric Adams wins or if another Democrat wins, he's going to be looking to get the New York City Buildings Commissioner, where all the soft Republicans from New York City get under Democratic thing. And usually they get indicted too. So Joe, I hope you don't get indicted. I actually like you. I actually think that you're a good guy. I think that we would agree on a lot of things. I just think that you're not too good at your job. So that's my opinion.
Good guy or nice guy? But I think
nice guy. Nice guy.
Nice guy. Yeah, I would say nice guy.
Nice guy, not a good guy.
Nice guy, but not good enough to actually take a stand where it matters. Again, this is much bigger than pizza. This is not about pizza. It's a show. It's a mirage. And if anyone thinks it's actually about pizza, it's not really looking underneath the surface. Just superficially at the surface, it's far beyond pizza. I think this really is crushing the New York City that we know. It's really alarming. It's damaging. I really believe that New York City has become unrecognizable in comparison to the New York City we knew. And even, it's interesting when you hear people talk about, is there garbage in the streets? There's sometimes the streets smell of urine, but there's nothing more iconic and special in New York. And it's being, that's what makes New York: bagels and pizza and matzah and the vast amount of different communities coming together. And these are not just foods of Italians and Jewish. They're foods of New Yorkers. The streets of New Yorkers. Wow, this is a great picture. It's funny, right? I'm glad you just brought that picture up. Let's get off bagels. Here we go. This is great. Talking about Letitia James. I think it's really important that we talk about this because this has a connection to the actual mandates. And the reason why I'm saying it, because the mandates really create the platform of where this Marxist ideology can go. And we're seeing it. And, arguably, we could say that at this particular promotion ceremony, is it a professional act for the firefighters to be booing and screaming and yelling? No. It's as a whole, no. But are we going to try to individually attack firemen for speaking out? I think this is a good opportunity for a politician or someone in a leadership position to say, well, you know what? Why is this happening? Why is this happening? To take it on the chin and maybe have a conversation aside and say, you know what? Let's try to avoid that happening in the future. But to make a public stance about it is completely embarrassing. It just shows the entire administration of the New York City Police Department is mirroring the politicians that oversee them. Mayor Eric Adams and also Governor Hochul and Letitia James. Everyone in this particular administration throughout the city and the entire state suffers from egos, weak egos, and it's ultimately about control. They want to control you. They want to force you to take a shot. They want to force you what to say, what to think, what to do. They want to force you to move in the manner that they expect you to perpetuate their politics. And from what we saw at that fireman ceremony, it's absolutely ridiculous that the byproduct was to go after these firemen for booing. I think it's complete insanity. It's despicable. I think they should just take it on the chin and keep moving.
Yeah, I think honestly, when that first happened and when they booed Letitia James and it came out that the Chief Hodges, John Hodges, Chief of Department for the Fire Department, another token paleface compliant, he would definitely take a knee if he was asked to. He would make a great NYPD chief. He probably would be right up there. John Shell would have great competition. So would Mike Kemper. So they're glad that he's on the fire department. However, it's not too good for the men and women of the fire department. But So they said he literally put out a memo to his people that you need to turn yourself in if you were partaking in booing or doing any of this stuff to Letitia James, or else we will hunt you down. Gave the name of whatever their internal affairs division is. I forget what the 3-letter thing is, but basically turn yourself in or we hunt you down. I mean, it went national, right? Everybody was public outcry. I mean, we made a bunch of funny memes about it. Those things went absolutely viral. I mean, they went from people that don't even like myself, Eric, was sharing them because they were funny. We made Laura Kavanaugh the commissioner as Stalin, you know, and a bunch of other things. And basically, we will hunt you down, things of that nature. I think it's unprofessional? Yes, but I think a lot of what the FDNY does when they're not at work is very unprofessional. How they act at the St. Patty's Day, the difference between NYPD funerals and FDNY funerals is night and day. It's night and day afterwards. I mean, we go out in uniform and have a drink, we're suspended. Some of us are losing our jobs. And I'm not talking about that we got into a fist fight. I'm talking about you had a sip of a beer, you're getting suspended. You know, you're getting suspended. So it's night and day. I'm not knocking the firemen because, listen, I think you need aggressive, high testosterone males that you say, hey, look, that building's on fire. More than likely, it's going to fall to the ground. But do me a favor, run in there and make sure nobody's in there. So the guys that are going to do that are going to be a little rough. When they drink, they're going to be a little bit more rough, right? Same's true for a New York City police officer, by the way, right? But we're held to a completely impossible standard. So what happens? Public outcry happens. I'm sitting there like, wait, this has been happening to myself and Eric for 2 months. Way worse than this. Way worse than you're going to get disciplined and go sit and listen to some bullshit interview or whatever they want to call it, re-education. They were going to be re-educated. We're getting threatened by mobsters. We're getting fake criminal investigations put up against us. Our children are being threatened. All happening from the upper echelon of the NYPD. And everyone sees it and knows what's going on. It's like, I can't believe this is going on, but nobody wants to talk about it. So I'm sitting there going, what the hell is this? This is national news. This has been going on for the last 3-4 months to myself and Eric. Nobody cares. Nobody wants to talk about it because it's not convenient to talk about. But, it's the firemen. Oh, my goodness. So it goes national. So now he backpedals. Token pale-faced John Hodges, Chief Token pale-faced John Hodges. He backpedals. He says, no, the investigation is about other things in department policy that were violated, but he wasn't he couldn't say exactly what it was. Complete lie. They're going after firemen because they booed Letitia James. Is it professional? No. But is it warranted? Absolutely.
Yeah, again, I think we mentioned this on a prior podcast, but it's important to note why this administration is far worse than when we were under de Blasio and that administration throughout the entire state. Even though Bill de Blasio was, I'd say, the second worst mayor of New York City, it was a far different scene than it was and it is now. I think that Mayor Bill de Blasio, while I don't agree with his policies, showed a lot much thicker skin, even though he was not, he didn't have any prior law enforcement experience, but he showed a lot thicker skin than the politicians that we see now. At police department funeral of Ramos and Lou, the police officers, including myself, turned their backs to him, and we never heard boo. He just took it on the chin and he kept moving in comparison to the politicians that we see now. They're all progressive politics, but he showed far more thicker skin. And I will applaud him for that. I will say that he received a lot more criticism than anyone in this administration right now because he was not black himself. And he was able to combat that without showing emotion and without getting his ego involved. So that's why I say he's the second worst mayor, because Mayor Eric Adams never did he get involved and stand and say, listen, I understand this was unprofessional. He could have stood and said this was unprofessional as a whole. However, the firemen and the police officers have been through an extreme amount of circumstances in the past few years post George Floyd. And at this point, I ask you to support these men and women and let it go. But no, he did not do that. And I do believe that maybe what we saw, maybe Bill de Blasio would do something like that because he did not let his ego involved. He didn't show any emotion. Am I saying that's completely normal? But it was definitely a better response than what we see now.
Absolutely. And you got to think the police department is filled with cowardly snitches who would sell their own mother out for a 3% raise. So, you know, like, so even at that time, right, we all turned our back. And I don't want to say all of us, because there were plenty of people at both Ramos and Lou's funeral who didn't turn their back, right? And they were watching all of us who did. But I think the main difference is there were thousands and thousands of us there, and so many people did it. And it just showed when you stand in unity, they kind of just got to take it on the chin, because that's what happened. You saw the overwhelming majority of the New York City Police Department who cannot really protest, and they didn't protest, and they didn't yell, and they didn't curse, and they didn't say anything. They turned around and they turned their back on their own mayor twice at 2 funerals when officers were assassinated, and they were assassinated directly because of the rhetoric that he pushed. And by the way, Eric Adams pushed same rhetoric. Eric Adams and Bill de Blasio, one and the same, in my opinion. Only difference is Eric Adams is black and you can't bash him. I remember the newspaper articles of Bill de Blasio, the clown faces, putting him as a clown. If they did that to Eric Adams, he would cry, and there would be screams of racism, and this administration would probably try to bring criminal and civil charges against any of the media that did that. I mean, I think that's another reason that this podcast is so very popular, is because our memes that we believe in satire. We believe in exercising our First Amendment rights. We believe that satire has been through all of time. Even kings in England would get made fun of through the various cartoons and plays and things of that nature. So we believe that's a good public discourse, and that's part of this platform. So if you don't already, check us out. We have all our links provided below in the details of wherever you listen or watch this podcast. Definitely check those out. They are really funny. And again, I think that's a major factor on why we get so heavily attacked, and it stems to ego.
Absolutely. I think ultimately we identify that the biggest problem with this administration as a whole, as crazy as it sounds, is ego. The entire administration. Obviously, this podcast focuses more on the New York City Police Department, the fire department, and other agencies. But we see it spreading. It's become an epidemic. But when we take focus on the New York City Police Department, we expect, especially the New York City Police Department, to have thicker skin more than any other agency. And that's ultimately the whole point of the Civilian Complaint Review Board, is to hold the police department accountable, to have that thick skin to deal with the public. And it's ironic that the same people that make discipline for police officers, the upper echelon of the police department, and the same ones that critique the police officers when they're in critical situations, cannot handle criticism themselves, that they do not have the skin to handle criticism from the public when they're public figures, that both John and I received numerous times, which we're already aware of, but so many people have messaged us the outcome of the Supreme Court of the United States, that public figures cannot block you on social media and cannot delete their accounts. And we're constantly getting it because this weak administration is known for doing that. And we know numerous people that have been blocked. So if you have been blocked by Kaz Daughtry or John Shell or any other upper echelon public figure in the New York City Police Department, you should file a lawsuit. They're expected to handle this. They're expected to handle criticism. It's part of their career. It's part of balance, and it should be healthy, and they should be able to accept it.
They should be able to, but you need to know who you are, and you need a clear message and a clear defined role in what you're doing. And if you had that, you would have those things to fall back on, right? You would understand who you are, what your mission is as at hand. And the critics you would basically brush off. That's why myself and Eric basically brush off any of the criticism we receive, any of the threats we receive. And I honestly it doesn't bother me. Sometimes I laugh at it. I'm sad at it. I think I get disappointed sometimes, but then I just shake it off, and Eric does the same thing, and we go back to doing what we're doing because we believe in what we're doing. We know what we're saying is coming from our heart and what we believe to be true. Now, it may be wrong, but it's what we believe to be true. And again, we open up to anybody, including the people that threatened us, including the people who we live rent-free in their head every day, by posting on social media, either quoting them or giving our thoughts on various topics. We open it to them because we're confident in who we are and what we're saying, and we believe in the mission that we're doing. And I believe that is the stark contrast that you see from this podcast as to when you look at the upper echelon of the NYPD. They do not have those same features and those same traits, and the integrity shines through that they don't have any. And they are not who they say they are on camera and in their tweets. And honestly, I was looking at John Schell's tweets. I'm not going to pull them all up, but go through NYPD Chief of Patrol tweets and just tell me what you see. You consistently see him talking about the critics, but holding on to the work that the rank and file of the men and women of the New York City Police Department do. Myself and Eric Dim, we have spoken out on some of the actions of the rank and file. But again, overall, we support the rank and file of the NYPD more than their own unions do. We understand it a lot more than most of them do, because the job is so young at this point. So a lot of the things we talk about is in support of the men and women in the NYPD. I mean, we push back at politicians, we push back at policy, we push back at legislation. We advocate to keep New Yorkers safe on top of that. And those things are not in opposition of the rank and file, but yet when you look at John Schell's tweets, you hear him talking about the critics and the work that these men and women do, when no one's really criticizing the work of the rank and file. On all ends of the spectrum, what they're talking about is you guys, the leadership. They're talking about the direction of the New York City Police Department. Now, I believe that the direction that myself and Eric are talking about is the true path to direction to public safety, and I believe that you guys agree with that. And you see that the critiques from the far left, who are completely, in my opinion, unhinged, don't want policing, want to abolish the police. And yet I see that the upper echelon is much friendlier and much more able to take those critiques with a grain of salt and stand firm than they are to take the similar critiques from us. And I believe it shows a lot about who they are.
Well, I think it's also, excuse me, I think it's also important to note that, yes, we support the rank and file. And some of the rank and file that we have been critical of, ultimately, we really are being critical of the leadership. I put blame on the leadership for some of the actions of the boots on the ground that we have seen recently that have been inappropriate. I put the blame on the leadership. And best comparison I could say, or best scenario, is the case of the Lieutenant Nicholas Stephanopoulos, who is the lieutenant of the CRT team, which is the citywide response team, who's operating khaki pants. We were very critical of an incident he was involved in where he stomped his foot on a perpetrator's head while this perpetrator was already under control. I do blame him, but ultimately I blame him because I blame John Schell. I blame the leadership. I blame John Schell for putting him in that position. I blame John Schell for actually creating this environment where he's led to believe that he can operate any matter and that he operates with impunity. I believe that he created that monster. So ultimately, the blame, even when it comes to rank and file, is the blame on leadership. I blame that this Sergeant Duran, that was indicted, is because of John Schell. It's John Schell's tactics that led Sergeant Duran in that position to be aggressive towards anyone that is in pursuit. He didn't say if you could use other resources. Why not? The sergeant used available resources in or around him to gain control of that perpetrator. Unfortunately, he met his demise, but he did exactly what he was paid and trained to do. So I blame the leadership. It's always the leadership that is meant for blame. It's always the leadership that will get praise as well. There's no bad troops, only bad leaders. I think we should reflect on that.
Yeah, before we wrap up, I just want to talk about that real quick. Nick Stephanopoulos, lieutenant, he was one of the lieutenants from CRT that we're talking about that was making up complete lies about myself and Eric Dim in an attempt to intimidate and silence us because he was sent by Chief Token Paleface John Schell. So he was sent to attempt to intimidate us. I mean, but the kid can't put two sentences together. So, I mean, I was like, we weren't deterred by what he was doing at all. I just couldn't believe that a New York City lieutenant who's in charge of the top unit and one of the top units in the New York City Police Department would put his name and his career out there like that. So, you know, scuffle happens after I don't even want to say a scuffle because it really wasn't a scuffle. Car pursuit happens. He strikes the defendant who was in the car after the car crashes. Again, myself and Eric are against these car pursuits. Strikes him. Defendant folds like a cheap suit. Two cops get on top of him. He's face down on the ground with his hands behind his back, and Stephanopoulos steps on his head, right? I believe it to be a stomp from what I see. So does Eric. We looked at it numerous times. You hear a boom. And then what do we see? We get a video from a BLM activist who intentionally, while high, ran over a New York City police officer. Ran him over. Boom. Ran over a New York City police officer. She then gets arrested. She gets pulled out of the car. And again, a similar situation happens, right? Similar situation happens. She's down on the ground. New York City police officer comes over. And to me, it appears that there is a slight kick to her head while she's down on the ground. You could see from the vantage point of another body camera. Now, I believe that that's wrong. I do. I believe that we need to be better than that. We need to take our emotions out of it. I believe, by the way, both of these people operating these vehicles are pieces of garbage and should do serious jail time in New York City. So let's just clear the air with that. But I believe that we need to be bigger than that. I also do agree that in the heat of the moment, there is no referee there. And sometimes you're going to make a mistake. And those things need to be held in account. Now, this woman took a slight kick to the head. She was not injured. When you contrast it to the Stephanopoulos injury, the kid started convulsing and he was in a coma for 2 days. So serious injury, right? Serious injury, serious physical injury, as opposed to nothing. What happens to the kid where there was no injury? He's suspended. He's suspended without pay. His health benefits are removed. His gun and his shield is removed. And he's sent to the wolves, right? Because when you get suspended, it basically means this was egregious enough that the New York City Police Department is saying you can't even operate in a modified fashion, right? For someone who wasn't injured. Now, was it wrong? Yes. Was it wrong? Should there be discipline? Yes. Should he be fired for that? I don't think so. Should it be a serious thing? I believe it should be taken very seriously, but I don't believe it's an arrestable offense. I don't believe, because there is no injury, right? So what is that? I strike you and there's no injury. There's nothing. It's nothing. It's harassment at the most. New York City Police Department is great at taking harassment reports, by the way, but just not for this podcast. But so there's a strike with no injury. Guy gets suspended. There's a strike with a serious physical injury. That lieutenant gets modified. And that is the biggest problem. So now when we talk about policing on here, we talk about the truth. We talk about the things that we would say in the locker room and the stuff that guys and girls are saying in the car. Like, wait a minute. How is that guy suspended? That didn't even look like a kick. And by the way, it looked like a weak kick to me. It did look like it was intentional, but it wasn't really like he wanted to, but he didn't. And he kind of did. And he did. It was wrong. I'm not saying that it wasn't wrong, but it clearly wasn't a stomp on somebody's head with all your weight and you hear their brain crack off the sidewalk and then fall into convulsions. It wasn't that. So what's the standard? We don't know. And that's the knock on the leadership. And that's another thing that is very different about this podcast than when you listen to the hundreds of others retired NYPD personnel that have podcasts. There's actually active guys in the NYPD that have podcasts. There's a lot of great true crime when they talk about past things. There's a great podcast where they listen to people, but there's none, like I said, where it's real-time analysis of the New York City Police Department. This is a completely new genre. I don't believe there is a genre for what myself and Eric do at this point, but we are creating it and we're continue to build this platform regardless of who likes it or doesn't.
Like John said, John, I think you nailed it. Absolutely. There's complete hypocrisy in the standard that we see in comparison to these cases. And what do you need for standard? You always need comparison. So if we compare these two cases, they either should be both suspended or both modified. I don't see why there's a difference. However, just by looking at it on the surface, I would say the case with Nick Stephanopoulos, a lieutenant, is far more egregious without even putting any emotion involved, just based on the inception of the disciplinary matrix. If we look at the disciplinary matrix, just based on that alone, if we look at, we have a lieutenant in comparison to a police officer. So the rank of a lieutenant holds more weight. That would be more aggravating factors than that the rank of a police officer. This lieutenant has more years on the job. That's more of an aggravating factor than that of this police officer. This lieutenant is in khaki pants, and this police officer is in blue pants, which means he's in a specialized unit. He has the knowledge and know-how. He should know better. So if we actually we have to look at fact. I don't agree with the discipline matrix, but that is the document that the NYPD goes by at this point. So going by the discipline matrix, which is what they have to refer to, the case of Nick Stephanopoulos, the lieutenant, should be weighed heavily, far more than this police officer. And that's not what we're seeing. But if they do use it, what we're seeing is them using the mitigating factors as nepotism. And that is in favor of those in the circle of nepotism. Another fault, another flaw of this disciplinary matrix, which we have exposed numerous times on this podcast. If you are a New York City police officer, if you have not read that discipline matrix, you must do it now. If you are a member of the public, please read it, and you'll get a better understanding of what we're saying here.
Yeah, so just to put it in perspective, real quick to sum it up, you're on the floor face down with police officers on top of you, handcuffed. A lieutenant in charge of one of the top elite units in the NYPD stomps on your head. You crack your skull on the sidewalk. You go into a convulsion. That lieutenant is modified. His gun and his shield is removed from him. However, he remains on the payroll with health benefits. And I would even question if he continues to get overtime, because I bet you any amount of money he is. He's continuing to get paid and make overtime, even though he is now working in an administrative role pending the outcome of this investigation. Right now, I'm going to put you in a different scenario. You're on the ground. You have your hands cuffed behind your back, and there's numerous police officers around you, and some police officer comes over and gives you a tap on your head with his foot. You're uninjured. That police officer is suspended. That police officer loses his salary for the 30 days that he's under suspension for, as well as his health benefits for himself and his children. It seems like a pretty obvious scenario which one is worse and who should receive the higher discipline here, but we don't see the reverse. I don't even believe they're the same scenario, because there's a serious physical injury and there's not an injury. So I don't even believe it's the same scenario, but let's just say they are. If that lieutenant's modified, clearly this police officer should be modified. But the NYPD wants to we have a zero tolerance policy on this, right? We have a zero tolerance policy on the on the unnecessary use of force. So they throw this kid to the wolves who doesn't injure and makes a bad mistake, and they look out for this kid, and he's continuing to getting overtime and all of these other things. And at the same time, I believe that's why you see they kiss Alvin Bragg's ass constantly, because I believe there's a lot of advocation to not charge that lieutenant. And there's this kid they'll say, oh, he's going to get charged. No way does it say you should kick someone in the head.
I agree. I think that we've exposed that nepotism is the biggest flaw of the New York City Police Department, even far more than diversity, equity, inclusion. And I think that we could actually make the comparison with this without even taking the injuries into account. Because who set the standard? Mayor Eric Adams set the standard when the police officer, the 121 police in Staten Island, was punched to the face numerous times by a female juvenile perpetrator. And in response, he deployed punches. And Mayor Eric Adams, in the beginning of his administration, set the standard. How did he set the standard? He said, without looking into injuries or looking into the case without investigation, he said it did not look good. So based on that standard, that cop was suspended. So if we use that standard, both incidents should be based on that standard. The lieutenant should be suspended, and so should the police officer, because Mayor Eric Adams set that standard. I believe that if you're going to make a standard, then you have to hold up that standard going through. But that's not what we see here. What we see that has affected the police department far more than diversity is nepotism. And nepotism is ripping through the police department, and it's brought the police department where we are now. No vision, no leadership because of nepotism. I mean, ultimately, who is in charge of this police department? If you think it's Ed Caban, you are fooled. We only see Ed Caban at parties, right? And tweets of kids and all hunky-dory stuff, but never at critical incidents. What are your thoughts? Oh, I'm sorry, but Ed Caban is actually, he's the one who's going around finding the technology for the globe that Kaz Daughtry spoke of in Qatar. What are your thoughts of Ed Caban as we speak right now? What do you think he's doing?
I don't know. Maybe associating with the criminal who threatened me for no reason. I mean, he's going to parties. He speaks about things that are completely unrelated to policing or any of. You didn't even hear him speak about the National Guard being deployed. You didn't hear him speak about the shooting. You don't hear him speak about anything. And I think you highlighted a really good point, what you brought up earlier. Tina Moore wrote an article, the real New York City police commissioner, and it was when Kaz Daughtry was a first grade detective. If you look back at that time, you look at a speech that Keechant Sewell did at a women's leadership conference. She spoke that said, you're going to be told what to do by people with half your experience, half your age and half your experience. I believe she was talking about Kaz Daughtry when she mentioned that. I believe that Tina Moore's article hit that nail on the head, because even at that time, as a first grade detective, he was telling chiefs what to do, and they were complying, which not all of them. I know some people that told them off, told them the way to go, but I know a lot of people that didn't. And so I believe he is the legitimate police commissioner. I believe the point that you highlighted about the jacket, if you go back to that speech that we brought up, you clearly see the deputy commissioner of public information has deputy commissioner on his jacket, and you clearly see that Daughtry has Commissioner Daughtry, right? No deputy, no assistant, no nothing. Commissioner Daughtry, because he's going to add what he really is, I believe. But there is a strong rumor that Tariq Shepard, tender hands Tariq Shepard, who didn't like to go out and do police work, who stayed in DCPI his whole career. So, John, I'd love to know what you think about Tariq Shepard's career, if you could hone in on that, and just let us know how effective Tariq Shepard was as a sergeant, as a cop, as a lieutenant, and as a captain. If you could let us know those, we'd appreciate it. But there is a rumor that he is going to be the police commissioner. But even if it is true that he is, or even if Tanya Kinsella becomes the police commissioner, strong rumor, by the way, that Ed Caban's going to step down and Tanya Kinsella is going to step down, which also leads me to believe that there's a very large federal investigation going on in the New York City Police Department. But those are all rumors. If they turn out to be true, then my suspicions, I think, would be accurate. But if they're not, and Kinsella becomes the PC or Shepard becomes the PC, I believe ultimately Kaz Daughtry will still remain the real PC.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's really laughable at this. We could predict right now. I'll predict the tweets coming from LePetri, John Schell, and Michael Kemper. I can tell you right now, if Tariq Shepard is appointed as the police commissioner, despite the lack of a career, we will hear from those three pale faces how outstanding he is, how proud they are to work for him, how it's been a pleasure. And they will refer to him as the police commissioner. And they will get down and bend on a knee, and they will bow to him in every manner. We can be confident. We've seen it before, and they're going to do it again, despite the fact they have a career. But here's the ultimate question. Why? Why won't Mayor Eric Adams just appoint Kaz Daughtry as the police commissioner? Why not? At this point, we know he's running the police department. What are your thoughts on that?
I just don't think that Eric Adams is a good manager in anything. I used to say about Bill de Blasio that I could give this man the most profitable Dunkin' Donuts in New York City and it would fold within 3 months' time. I think it would be even shorter for Eric Adams. I really do. I don't believe he's a good manager. I don't believe he makes good decisions. I don't believe he surrounds himself with the right people. I don't believe, I agree with you. I don't believe Kaz Daughtry has shown the experience level to run a patrol squad on a day tour, never mind run the biggest department in the world or be anywhere near to even put himself in the same realm. And I'm not a fan of John Shell, by the way. I think that under a different mayor, I would be a big fan of him, and I probably would have thrived under him, and so would Eric as well. But he's not his own person, and that's been true for every chief, not to just knock on him. That's just, some had great mayors, some didn't, right? It is what it is. I can't, some people align with what you believe in and some people don't. But he sold his soul to this progressive movement, to this mayor. And for him to sit there and put Kaz Daughtry on the same pedestal as himself is a slap in the face to himself. Because again, as much as I'm not a fan, he does not belong to stand on the stage with you. Either do I, either does Eric. If we were still in the job, we'd be rookie captains. You'd be yelling at us for nonsense. Or I'd be a senior lieutenant. You'd be yelling at me for something else. Like, I'm not going to knock that you didn't go through these processes and do your career. You're the boss. And that is clear as day. And so the knocks on Kaz Daughtry, that, by the way, we abuse all of you. So we don't just hone in on Kaz Daughtry. We go on all of you. It's jokes. It's satire. The knocks on Kaz Daughtry are warranted from the rank and file because they're saying, what has this kid done that he's being put on this pedestal? Like, where does this talent come from? And you guys sitting up there, and same for you, Kemper, like sitting there, like putting him on this pedestal. Same for the police commissioner. Same for even Tanya Kinsella and Tariq Shepard. I mean, they've had much better careers. They did rise through the ranks, but they're putting Kaz on the same stage as them when he hasn't earned it at all. And he clearly is not doing well in these positions.
Well, I think that's what's important to know. Even if we bypass the fact that he hasn't earned it, which we both agree, and I'm sure the overwhelming majority of people agree with us that he hasn't earned that position. But since he's there, he has not shown the ability or any capabilities to actually carry out this position, to actually handle the job. And that's ultimately the problem. He's there. The decision was made. It's not a decision that we agree with, but he's there. And ultimately, we want him to succeed so that the city succeeds. But he's failing. It's an epic fail. And all we hear about is this technology that's not even there yet. We need to know is what you're doing with the resources that you have now. And it's a complete epic fail. And hearing him be completely defensive and protecting his ego is another problem. It's not helping public safety. It's just making things worse. But I think the one biggest problem, and I think this is the problem of any failing organization, is there's no clear indication of who's in charge and what the direction is. And it's interesting to even say, right, Ed Caban will step down. Does it even matter if he steps down or steps to the right or steps to the left? It would make no difference. I don't even think anybody would notice. It would be day two and everybody would say, who was the police commissioner? Who? This is the most invisible and insignificant police commissioner we have ever seen. He has no position at all on what his leadership stance. If you had to say right now, or anyone, what are Ed Caban's policies? What is Ed Caban's leadership style? What direction is he going? And you couldn't even provide that answer, right? So with that being said, I know we're close to about 2 hours and 15 minutes. I think we covered a lot of topics. Is there any topics that you think we should discuss at this point?
No, I think this was a great podcast. I think it was a great discussion. And I just want to say, like, the main thing, like we've received so much opposition from the upper echelon and from their lackeys. But I just want to ask you one question before you go, Eric. Before we go, you're the police commissioner, or you're a high-ranking official in the New York City Police Department that could speak for the New York City Police Department. Okay, so that's you. You just wear commissioner on your jacket. We're not sure if you're a deputy or an assistant or whatever you are, or the actual police commissioner. But here he is. He's dim. And you see that a lot of your guys listen to a podcast, follow them on social media, and you don't necessarily agree with what's going on that podcast, what's said on the podcast, the satirical memes they put out, or the things they post about, what would you do as the New York City Police Commissioner, or would you do anything at all?
Well, I'm glad you said that. I would absolutely do nothing. I would not even acknowledge it, if anything. But I would do some of those satirical memes. I would probably print them up and put them in my office so that I'm part of the humor. I would actually laugh at some of the names that they refer to me as, and I would laugh about the names that they have. But as far as trying to deter the men and women from watching it, no. They have a right to vent. If that's their way of venting, let them do it. That's none of my business. If it doesn't affect the actual job that they do, if that doesn't affect policy and they're doing the job appropriately, if that's their venting mechanism, I would absolutely not get involved. And again, I would show the humor in those satire memes. And that's what I think they should do. I think by not paying attention to it, it would ultimately probably bring to a calm, and it would not be part of the conversation in everyday policing. And I think it's part of expression. I think that the police officers do have a right to express themselves, and that's part of mental health. If they agree with this podcast, it's just another outlet, MSNBC, Fox News, New York's Finest Unfiltered podcast, System Unfiltered, whatever you're watching. Whatever you're watching out there, they have a right. They have a right to their opinions and a right to their expression. If it doesn't affect their job, you should not get involved. But you should acknowledge the satire memes with humor if you are going to acknowledge it. I would acknowledge it with humor, and I would laugh with them on it. They have a right to vent. As long as they're doing their job and they show respect amongst each other, I would not get involved.
Last question. Podcast is still popular, regardless of all your attempts to ignore it. Very popular, continues to grow. You continue to see the memes. Your friends are sending them to you. They're going around throughout the whole city. And they notice that you've been watching everything they do, and they reach out to you and fight you on the podcast.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. When you're a public figure, you have to show face, and you have to show that you are not a coward. You have to face opposition. And that would be my motto, as it is on this podcast. It would be my motto. And if I'm in a position of authority with the New York City Police Department or any other agency, I believe opposition meets opportunity. So I would definitely come on the podcast. Absolutely. Even if I was going to face confrontation, that would be my position, so that I would have a better understanding, just as we do with Jose LaSalle in comparison. Understand, how did this podcast derive? What's going on there? And if he came on this podcast, he would find that this podcast emanated as a result of the New York City Police Department's failed policies under Mayor Eric Adams, that John McCary was not protected in his right to not inject himself with something he did not agree with, and that Eric Dim was out there retrieving illegal firearms, and he was not protected because of failed policies and overzealous Civilian Complaint Review Board. I would have that opportunity to find the root cause of that podcast. So you want to understand how something fermented, where it came from. And that was the ultimate reason of having Jose LaSalle on this. So again, I say opposition meets opportunity.
Oh, well said. I agree. I would do the same exact thing. I would ignore until you can't ignore anymore, and then I would meet head on. I'd go on the show, and that's it. Answer the questions. But again, I don't believe that they can, because the questions are not friendly to the true answers to the questions are not going to be friendly to their integrity or their character, because you're going to see the leadership fail. If we brought up the one situation about Stephanopoulos and the other kid who was suspended, they wouldn't know what to say. They would run off the stage. If we brought up the mandate, they wouldn't know what to say. If we talked about George Floyd, if we talked about Eric Garner, if we talked about the chokehold bill, the How Many Stops Act, if we talked about how all these things affect policy and affect legislation, if we talk about all the nonsense that's happening in the New York City Police Department, they don't want to talk about it. And that's basically what it is. We want layup ground ball interviews, and we don't want anyone telling the public what goes on. And again, I'm just going to remind everybody, myself, Eric, we swore an oath to the Constitution before God. We did not swear omerta to a police commissioner, to a mayor, to a chief, to somebody's driver. We didn't swear oaths to anybody saying that we'll never go against this family. The overriding thing in this is public safety. The overriding thing is the safety of our families, the safety of ourselves, and to seek the truth. And that's what we try to do every day. So we appreciate all of you staying with us. We appreciate all our new listeners. We appreciate everybody that's been with us from the get-go, because you truly are the brave ones, right? You've been with us from the get-go. You guys have all seen what's going on. And we appreciate it, and we're going to keep going. There's going to be more and more. And we're doing the weekly show now. We're going to look to step it up in the near future. Like I said, we're getting to a point like where we are going to step this platform up, and you're going to see other shows on this platform as well, not just myself and Eric. Like, we are moving towards bigger and better things, and we believe this is the way forward. Conversation is the way forward. Eric, you want to end us off, my friend?
Yeah, I just want to say also, if anyone has an opportunity to check out, John was on the podcast, and so was I myself. Mighty Fuzz podcast. And the reason why I say go on, first of all, he's an extremely likable guy. I think he's really cool, congenial. And he's a big supporter of the U.S. Constitution. And I have to agree with him. He interviewed me on his podcast. He interviewed you as well. He interviewed you as well. And he talks a lot about the Constitution. What he talks about is he supports the police department. He doesn't support all the policies of how the police department operates. He's definitely a bit of a freedom fighter. And I really support him. He's really a great guy. And what I like is what he said. And I'll never forget this. He said, do the cops really understand when they take that oath of how it correlates to the U.S. Constitution? So I really support him when he said that. And you said they don't. And I can't agree with you more. I don't think the cops really understand when they take that oath of what they're taking the oath to, what that U.S. Constitution really means. So, Mighty Fuzz, if you have an opportunity to watch us, I want to thank you. I think you're outstanding. I think you put out a hell of a podcast. I think you're a great guy. Him and his wife, they're really a great team together doing their podcast. So check him out, Mighty Fuzz podcast. I think that he's 100% right. The cops have to understand the U.S. Constitution. You have to actually, when you say those words, the oath, you actually have to feel those words. I think of the best correlation I could use is I think of what Arnold Schwarzenegger, if anybody's a fan of him, I'm a huge fan of Arnold Schwarzenegger. I think he's an intelligent man. I think he's a man of fortitude. And he always talks about when he used to work out, and it was so important to him in bodybuilding that when he would work out, that he would actually put his mind in the muscle. And that's how he grew his body. So I think the same thing when police officers take the oath for the U.S. Constitution, I think they should actually put their mind into those words and think about what they're saying and actually take it with the weight of that. So again, I agree with you, John. Thank you to all those that have been supporting us from day one. We are growing thanks to your support. And for those that are out there giving us hatred, we appreciate it because you help this podcast propel as well. We thank you for getting our message out there. And our message out there is truth, common sense, opinion, opposition, meeting opportunity, expression, and common sense, and to bringing back masculinity, the good traits of the New York City Police Department and police departments throughout the entire country. So for everyone out there watching, thank you so much. John will turn this over to our friends at Laidlaw Blue. Keep watching us. We appreciate it. Thank you on everyone out there. New York's Finest Retired Unfiltered podcast. Keep it going.
Law enforcement professionals dedicate their lives to serving and protecting our community. But who's protecting their financial futures? That's where Laidlaw Blue comes in. Our wealth management platform is specifically designed for the law enforcement community. Laidlaw Blue is a division within Laidlaw Wealth Management, run by retired New York City detective John McDermott. His status as a retired detective uniquely positions him to establish a deep connection between Laidlaw Blue and the law enforcement community. Our platform is easy to use and provides a range of financial services, including investment management, retirement planning, and insurance solutions. With Laidlaw Blue, you can secure your financial future and provide for your loved ones. Our team of experienced financial advisors understands the unique challenges and opportunities that law enforcement professionals face. We're here to help you navigate the complexities of financial planning and achieve your goals. Laidlaw Blue. Secure your financial future today. Book a meeting using the QR code displayed or call us directly on 888 901 blue. That's 888 901 blue.